Hi, so let's look at copying. So the copy, when we're copying from one image to another, what we're doing is we are taking the color in a source image. We're getting the value of those the colors of the pixels, and we're copying them to a target image, a lot like we did with mirroring, except we were copying the color from one position in the same image to another position. But here we're going to be copying the color from one image to another one, from one picture object to another. So we're not really copying the pixels, we're replicating the color of the pixels across pictures. Some things that this will allow us to do, which will be useful, is we'll be able to create collages, which is your final project you'll be copying in order to do that. It'll let us crop a picture, so when we're copying from one image to another, we don't have to copy all of the pixels, so we'll be able to do cropping. And it'll also allow us to scale, that is to take a larger image and make it smaller, or a smaller image and make it larger. So we're going to be using a couple of just blank images. They're just basically white rectangles that can be found in your media sources files for our copying. Later we'll learn how to just create a generic blank image that we can copy onto of any size, but right now we're going to be using these 7 by 9.5 or 640 by 480 pixel canvases. They're just, like I said, white rectangles that we can copy onto. And so basically what we're doing when we're copying pixels is we need to loop over all of the pixels in our source and loop over the positions that we want to copy to in our target. So kind of the tricky part is keeping track of those XY coordinates. So the source X and the source Y we're just going to do with a nested loop, much like we did, say, with mirroring, for example. Or the negative function that we rewrote, and then we're going to keep separate variables, targetX and targetY, that are going to keep track of where we're copying to, and we're going to have to increment those separately, not as part of the loop. So just for this example, we're going to look specifically at copying Barbara.jpg onto this blank canvas. And so this is our function to do that, and then we'll move to doing a more generic copy function from here. So the first part of this basically creates the image objects, the picture objects. So we're just getting we know that much like we did with the temple, we know that Barbara.jpg is in this file, so we're going to use the get media path to get that picture. And this is assuming before you run this function that you've set the media path. So once you do that, then you can just call copy barb, open close parentheses, and it'll do all of this for us. We're going to, and then we make a picture object with that file. So this just returns the full file name. Then we get the name of the blank canvas. We create a blank canvas picture object. So we've just set up our source and our target now. And then what we do is, in the loop, we're going to jump ahead and look in the loop first. We're going to get the color from the barb image at source X, source Y, and we're going to copy that color onto the canvas. So this is a lot like mirroring, except we're going from one image to another. And we're going to have to, inside of our Y loop, we're going to have to increment the target Y, because we're looping over source X and source Y as part of our for loop. But our target X and target Y we have to increment individually or separately. So we're just getting the color from the barb image and copying it to the canvas. So target X gets set to 0 at the beginning, outside of the X loop, before the X loop. Target Y gets set to 0 at the beginning of the X loop, because every time we copy down the column 0, column 1, column 2, we have to restart our Y value in the target. And Then again, at the end of the while loop, we're incrementing the target color, and or the target Y position at the end of the while loop, and then at the end of the X loop, we're incrementing the target X position, and that's just so that we're essentially looping over the target, just like we do the source. So we've seen this before in some of the little hands-on exercises, but just to reiterate what this is doing, this target X equal target X plus 1, what that does, it takes the current value of target X, adds 1 to it, and puts it back into target X. So if target X is 10, it's just adding 1, now it's 11, puts it back into target X. And so the impact is basically it's just incrementing the variable by 1. So, and then at the bottom of this loop, once we've done all this copying, it's going to just show Barbara, show the canvas, and then we're returning the canvas because we're creating this image that we're copying onto. It's sending it back to us so that maybe we can use it or do something else with it. So that's just copying. That copies Barbara to the upper left-hand corner of our canvas. And by making some fairly small changes, we can copy wherever we want to into the target. We also can, like I said, do some cropping and rotating and scaling as well. So if we want to just copy anywhere on the image, basically the way we would do that is we would start our target X at 100 and our target Y at 100. So instead of starting at 0, 0, we would start at 100, 100. And the impact of that is that now when I start at 0, 0 in my source and say, this is just a small example, if my target X starts at 3 and my target Y starts at 1, what happens is it's going to copy the color from 0, 0 in the source to 3, 1 in the canvas. Then it'll increment Y in the source and Y on the canvas, the target Y. And so now it's going to copy 0, 1 onto 3, 2, and it does that all the way down the column. And then it'll reset the target Y back to 0 and go back to the top of the X loop and increment it to 1. And so then we'll just end up copying all the pixels from the source to the canvas, only in a different position, not at 0, 0, like we did in the original function. So there's a little worked example where I show how to use the copy barb and modify it so it has a start X, start Y. And then your job is to create a generic copy function that would copy from any source file to any target file starting in any position. So it's basically just modifying the code just a little bit so that it's a more generic copy function. And notice we're going to change the name to copy instead of copy barb. So that's it. Good luck.